Welcome back, Miami Dolphins. Today we're going to be going over the stock up and stock downs of players and plenty of conversation to be had about the different position groups. And you need to know a couple things about the tight end position. But before we get into all that, make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. So today we're going to be going over those different things that I just discussed. First thing I wanted to touch on was the tight end position. So maybe a lot of people are going to be freaking out because Noah Fant is supposedly going to the Bengals. We're going to see how that turns out because I'm going with a buddy of mine to the Bengals game. So one thing I want to preface, because obviously right now, as it is, Tanner Connor's performing pretty well. Honestly, if I could say not a huge stock up, but the reality of the situation is Tanner Connor's playing pretty decent right now. Do I think we have a stud until Darren Waller comes back? No, but there's some things that we have to discuss with Darren Waller, which I think might make people excited about what's going on. So basically, I think he was on an interview essentially talking about what happened in New York and that, he didn't want to play. And I think all of us heard that he didn't want to play anymore. But there was more to the story. So we're going to get into that right now. Into Plaxico Burress, and if you don't know who that is, it was an old New York Giants wide receiver, shot himself in the kneecap or something like that. He was talking to him about why he didn't want to continue playing, and he said it was when the Giants were facing the Bills when he was on the team, and essentially what was happening with Brian Daboll is he was using the tight ends in a lot more of like a fullback type of role. And what Darren was basically saying is that he just didn't like playing that position. He wanted to play back to the way that he was playing when he was in the Raiders, where he was more of like a wide receiver, pass-catching tight end, and Brian Daboll wanted to force him to essentially be, a fullback tight end, and it just didn't work for him. So he kind of didn't want to be on the team. He was required because obviously you have a contract, but essentially he just didn't want to be a fullback, and that is really key to when we're talking about where we're at with the tight ends right now. Is that honestly, Darren Waller might be, once he gets into football shape, he's had a couple years of just not taking bumps and bruises. So, yes, it may be the fact that he's been out of the league, a couple years. We don't know what he's going to be physically, but also the reality of the situation is the reason he wanted to come back is because he felt like he wasn't being utilized right in New York under Brian Daboll, which if you look at a lot of their tight ends, you don't really know who they are because they don't use them like that. And sometimes it's, again, like with coaches, sometimes they make moves and you're just like, I don't really understand that. It was very similar where you have a pass-catching tight end in Darren Waller that's being used blocking all the time. And I get it. You want to block with your tight end, but a guy like that, you want him catching passes. You know what I'm saying? So essentially what that comes down to is that Darren Waller was just not being used in the way that he wanted to be used or that he thought he was going to be used. So he just didn't want to play at that point. And now that he's with the Dolphins, he's going to be used in much more of a Jonnu Smith type role. So he's probably going to be very happy with that. Now, we'll get into the stock downs and then get into the stock ups. So it's going to be three players that I want to talk about with their stock being down. And of course, this can quickly change when it comes to, going through training camp and whatever is happening. So it can happen. But again, right now at this point in time, I'm just not seeing the performances that I wanted to see. So first one we're going to talk about is Jalen Wright. Coming into this offseason, I think there was a couple videos of me talking about Jalen Wright taking over the feature back role. And a lot of the stuff that I'm hearing with Jalen Wright in training camp is either a mistake, a stop for a short gain, and then very rarely, I think I've heard it like maybe twice, that he broke more than a 10-yard run, which I don't know if that has to do with the offensive line. It might, so I preface this, I don't want to get ahead of myself. But, I'm hearing Devon Achane breaking 10-yard runs, not a lot, but way more than Jalen Wright. So, honestly, right now, I'm kind of iffy on where he's at because he had a lot of talk. He was probably one of the ones that had the most talk coming into the Dolphins season because he just really was saying that he was going to be an elite running back in the league. I think he went on, Kate Adams, or I think that's her name. She's pretty popular. She was an NFL Network analyst. He went on her podcast and basically said he can be, a top 5 elite running back in the league. So when you go and start saying these things, you come back stronger, which I totally get it. It's just unfortunate right now that I'm just not hearing a lot about Jalen Wright, because I personally thought he was going to have an excellent year. So right now, stock down on him. And the next one that I would basically consider is Zach Wilson. I think he had a pretty decent practice the last time out, but I mean, obviously, I think you guys are now, because of this stock down, are going to know one of my stock ups. Zach Wilson, the reality of the situation is that even though he's with Mike McDaniel, it still kind of a lot of the time seems like he's still Zach Wilson. Like he just, the talent is there, but he just, I don't know. There's a difference when pads come on. There's a difference when you start having team organized things, and it just maybe it will change throughout. But I'm telling you right now, I think, like I said, you guys understand who's going to be one of my stock ups. But Quinn Ewers is pushing him for that second role because, I mean, he's making some plays, but he is making some mistakes too. Now, again, I want to preface this that for quarterbacks, this is training camp. So it's a little different because you're not necessarily just trying to not throw interceptions. You're trying to work on things. So I don't know the full story, but so far there are some, underthrows, overthrows, interceptions, mostly by Willie Gay. But yeah, so stock down on Zach Wilson. I still think, him in the system, if he really wants to, he can be a pretty good quarterback. He's got all the intangibles. But, as for right now, I think the last practice, this was his best practice so far. And let's see, who's my third one? And the third stock down, but I want to preface this, before people start roasting me in the comments. The last practice, Kenneth Grant looked phenomenal. Like, he looked really good, But so far, out of all of the defensive linemen, like, if we could be 100% real, I'm talking Zach Sealer, Matt Dickerson, Benito Jones. I mean, pretty much Kenneth Grant and Benito Jones have been very similar in that you don't really hear much about them right now. Except for the last practice. The last practice, Kenneth Grant did some good things. And here's what I want to say with this too. Stock down only because a lot of you guys have so much hype for him coming in. And I think there's way too much hype for a rookie defensive tackle to come in and just, light it up like Cameron Wake. I think we have to preface that, again, like I said in one of my previous videos, that his role will be he just needs to take up two people and stop the run so that Zach Sealer and everybody else can eat. That's going to be his role this season. I don't think that he's going to be like Aaron Donald and getting 20 sacks in a season. I think he just needs to stop the run and take up two people. That's all he needs to do. But again, a lot of people were telling me in the comments and hyping me up saying like Kenneth Grant is going to be a beast. He's a rookie, just like Jonah. Right now Jonah's doing okay, but he's not like lighten it up, you know what I'm saying? He's doing what he needs to do, and it's the same thing with Kenneth Grant. He's right now he's not playing at an elite level, but again, we have to understand that these are rookies. They are young kids, and that it's going to take them a while to fully develop their skill sets and everything like that. So this stock down is only because of what you guys were saying about how much, a beast Kenneth Grant is going to be. And I think he's going to be very good. But I also am one of those that I'm realistic where I know that he's a rookie and he needs a lot of training. He has a lot to learn about the NFL. And it doesn't just happen overnight. Like some players get it like that. Some players it takes a little bit. And then eventually, a perfect example of that is the guy standing right next to him is Zach Sealer. Zach Sealer was in the league for I think like 5 years before the Dolphins picked him up from the Ravens practice squad, and he ended up being, a stud. But he was pretty much, I think, like for 4 or 5 years, was basically a nobody on practice squads. So, again, with Kenneth Grant, stock down only because everybody was hyping him up so much, and I think we need to take a second and wait for him to develop. Now my stock ups, and I think we already talked about this, but the first stock up right now is Quinn Ewers. One of the things that I think a lot of us have to recall is that a year before, he was really talked about as being one of the top quarterbacks in college football, and there was a lot of hype around him. Of course, things happened, and, it was what it was. But I think if we could realistically look at this, getting him for a 7th-round pick, this was like the perfect quarterback that you could pick up in the draft that would completely match what Mike McDaniel wants to do for an offense. God willing that he is here, next season. This is the perfect quarterback. He does pretty much exactly what Tua does, and he's very accurate with the ball, and he has a good spin on it. Pretty much does exactly what Tua does, honestly. Like, I could really see maybe a Matt Flynn in him, like something like that, where he could really probably eventually become a starter in the league if he keeps progressing like he was, because he went from minicamp just looking horrid, like he looked like he was just going to be throwing interceptions left and right, and now it's like the 3rd day of training camp, and I'm telling you right now, like I said, I think he's going to be pushing Zach Wilson maybe for that backup role. You paid Zach Wilson a lot of money, but I don't know. I mean, Quinn Ewers is looking really good. Like, he's fitting balls in between players. Like, I know he's in with the 3rd string. You're probably calling what you need to call for a rookie, but some of the throws he's making, it's like, all right, you don't just make that throw for whatever. You have to have a lot of skill to fit it. Like, again, these are Tua-type throws where you just fit it in between 3 people, and it's a perfect throw. So, I mean, the reality of the situation is my stock up is so much for Quinn Ewers right now. He is playing phenomenal. And like I said, I mean, Zach Wilson had a really good last practice. But if that doesn't continue, I mean, can you sit there as, at Mike McDaniel being who he is, you want to change the culture, right? So can you really sit there and want to change the culture, and then because someone's paid some amount of money, you pretty much give them the role that they don't deserve? You know what I'm saying? This is something you have to consider. If Quinn Ewers is outplaying Zach Wilson, does he become the backup? Do you, deal with having a $6 million 3rd-string quarterback? The reality of the situation is, if you want to change your culture, you show that whoever's performing the best gets on the field. You know what I'm saying? And this goes for anyone. 2nd stock up. I think we all know who this is, and I think it takes no preface to say this person. And honestly, I'm in an apartment complex, but if I wasn't, I'd do the Willie Gay scream, because it is Willie Gay. He is, I mean, dude, this guy, it's almost like, Terrell Dodson is great, but it's almost like saddening to think that maybe Willie Gay might be a backup, because he's given everything he's got. He's almost got like that, it's not an insult, but like that Forrest Gump mentality where it's just like he basically said that nobody offered him a contract except for the Dolphins, so he's giving everything plus some to the Dolphins right now, and he's playing phenomenal. I mean, I think he had 3 sacks on multiple quarterbacks last practice. He dropped an interception, which if he starts catching these interceptions, I mean, can you start Terrell Dodson? Because I know Terrell Dodson just started practicing recently. I really haven't heard much about him. Now, of course, it's going to take him a little bit. And the key is that, Terrell Dodson was kind of the Willie Gay last year. So, I mean, I'll tell you what, regardless of anything, we went from having a just doo-doo linebacker core to probably having one of the best in the league, because we talk about Willie Gay and Terrell Dodson and Jordan Brooks all the time, but we forget that we also have KJ Britt, who was a very good Buccaneers linebacker and is doing a great job in training camp as well. So, and then Channing Tindall is there, and he's starting to kind of put it all together. But Willie Gay right now, I mean, he's catching interceptions. If he starts catching more interceptions, I don't know how you can not keep him on the field. You got to have some sort of packages or something like that to keep him on the field. Maybe you do. I don't even know what you do, because you have so many outside linebackers. I don't know. But maybe you do like a Mike Will and then a Sam linebacker, situation. You'd run like a 3-4 or something like that, or a 4-3, maybe something like that. And you put like a NASCAR package and then have, Willie Gay, Jordan Brooks, and Terrell Dodson all on the field at the same time in a base package. I don't know. Maybe you do something like that to keep him on the field. But, dude, the guy is playing phenomenal. He's playing unbelievable. And this is not to negate, I don't need to talk about Jordan Brooks, because he is an elite linebacker. He is going to be one of the best in the league this year. So I don't really need to talk about him. But for someone to come in and take that type of contract and just to be playing like this, superseding expectations, really, really superseding expectations. I am so happy with Willie Gay right now. He's playing ridiculous, And the last stock up, which could have been a lot of players, I mean, we could choose Minka Fitzpatrick, we could choose, Jalen Phillips, we could choose Waddle, all of those guys. But really, I want to say Chop Robinson right now, setting the edge, I mean, like I said, I'm sitting here thinking that, Chop might be our best pass rusher this coming year. I don't want to speculate too much, but just the amount of tools that he has to his arsenal to become an elite pass rusher, I don't think anybody can really block him. I'm prefacing this straight off rip. I just don't see anyone that can block him. Especially watching last year, he's a rookie, literally a rookie, and you couldn't take him off the field because the only pass rush we were getting was him, and he was beating all sorts of offensive linemen. He was just going ham on everybody. And now, this coming year, he looks bigger, he looks faster, he looks smarter, he looks more into his craft. I don't think there's anybody that can really block him. I mean, I'm trying to think of an offensive lineman that would be able to block him, and I can't come up with one. I really can't. Maybe Penei Sewell. I don't know. Maybe. I think that would be a good show, watching those two go at it. I just don't think anybody can block him. I think this guy is going to be the best pass rusher on our team. And that's no knock on Jalen Phillips and Chubb. I think Chubb is an elite pass rusher. I think he's great. I love Jalen Phillips. I think he's a phenomenal pass rusher too. I just think that the amount of tools and the amount of youth and the amount of just pure speed and power, it's kind of similar to what Bradley Chubb was in the beginning of his career. You know what I'm saying? Like, very similar to that. Just a very similar, almost like a carbon copy of Bradley Chubb in his younger years, because he's got everything. He literally has everything. He can bull rush you. He can speed move around you. He can spin you over. He can, set the edge. He literally can do everything. So he's going to be one of my favorite players coming into this year, and especially in training camp, he looks phenomenal. Now, a couple of players that obviously, I don't want to say stock down because we didn't have high expectations for him. Obviously, Cam Smith, enough said. We really don't want to talk about him too much because it's just a disappointing. I think I already went ham in my other video. So stock down, obviously, like, it's not even worth a stock down. He's just worse than a stock down because it's just pathetic that you're a second-round pick like that and you don't even want to make an attempt in the offseason to try and secure your spot. And then the other stock down would probably be Tyreek Hill, just because I don't know what's happening with him right now. I think the last practice he was out for personal reasons. It's just a whole smorgasbord, and you all know I'm not, like, I love to play on the field, but the person as a man, I don't respect the way that he acts, and it's just not cool. But yeah, so far in training camp, we're looking good. I think we really have to preface the Darren Waller thing. I think maybe a lot of people aren't seeing the reality of the situation. He just didn't like playing the position that he had in Daboll's offense, which was basically a fullback position. So he might light it up when he comes into training camp, and Tanner Connor's been doing great. And like I said, all in all, I think the team looks really good. We'll see what we do at cornerback. Obviously, we need somebody there. But for the most part, every other position looks solid, especially, one of the things is, like, this offensive line looks nuts. And, we get Brewer in. It's going to be phenomenal. So, as always, guys, praise God, love God. He's great all the time. Fins up, baby. Love you all. Peace.